Today, it's an honor for me to be joined by Aditi Kinkhabwala. She was the national correspondent and reporter for NFL Network for 10 years, now with the NFL on CBS as a reporter. Thank you so much for the time today, Aditi. Really appreciate it. How are you doing today?
I'm a little bit nervous. I appreciate your having me, but if you're known for your tough questions, I don't really know what I'm in for.
Yeah, well, it's going to be really exciting to talk with you. I've seen a lot of your work. You've done a really great job. And over the years, I've seen you cover a lot of the AFC North teams in general, being based in Pittsburgh. But I'd love to hear your insight onto the Bengals this season. They made it so close to winning it all last season, just one drive away from getting it done. And they start off the year 4-4. And it seems like it might be a Super Bowl hangover for this team. But then here they go, win 8 in a row, and then two more big playoff wins, basically 10 wins in a row since then. So what do you think really just changed with the Bengals that they're able to, I guess, take it to the next level?
I think this is one of those things that you hear football coaches say all the time, but it really is true. It's a very hard to win in the National Football League. It's not just okay, you show up and you knock back anybody. I mean, think about your hometown Houston Texans. I remember talking to the Chiefs team reporter prior to their matchup, and I said, look, despite the Texans record, this isn't a team that's thrown in the towel, that's waving the flag. They're going to put up a fight. And what about that Texans Chiefs game, right? It took everything that the Chiefs had against the Texans. So similarly, I think that the Bengals had to go through something early in the season. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes that's where you sort of get your gut check a little bit. You know that you can't sleepwalk through something, that you're not just automatically anointed the AFC champs once again. And look, the Bengals are even better than they were a year ago. Part of that is Joe Burrow. We saw it in Joe Burrow as the season went on last year, as he was further removed from that knee surgery. That escapability, that confidence, that ability to bleed out of the pocket. We saw that as the year went on. Well, now he's even further removed from that knee surgery. So there's no health question there whatsoever. There's obviously more confidence. There's obviously even greater chemistry with his receivers. A year ago, it was exceptional the way he distributed the ball. It wasn't just, okay, I know Jamar Chase, I'm going to Jamar Chase. He was using his open man, whoever that was. That's even taken to another level. But then the big deal is right now you see what's happening in the trenches, and look at that offensive line. I mean, that's the story of this past weekend. The offensive line was clearly a weak spot a year ago. It was clearly something that the Bengals struggled with. It's exactly what Duke Tobin and the Bengals focused on in the offseason. They needed to shore up that line. Now, all of a sudden, they're going into Buffalo with 3 backups on the offensive line. And Manav, 1 sack. That's it. They gave up 1 sack. Those backups did great. There was no issue. I think that there's just a sense of focus. There's a sense of confidence. I think a lot of this underdog stuff is just really manufactured. And Zach Taylor kind of admitted that when he said he'll just trove the internet for anything and use it. But I don't think that this is a team that really actually needs bulletin board material for motivation. I think they really almost tasted something last year. They saw how they were able to galvanize a community that's so hungry for success. I mean, I remember being in Cincinnati for the Super Bowl send-off pep rally, and there were 25,000 people in the stands. It was freezing cold. It was awful. And every single ticket that was distributed was taken. And there was so much excitement. You saw that, the Bengals sold naming rights to their stadium, all of that. So that's all wonderful. But of course, on the other side, there's Patrick Mahomes, who did indeed practice today, who is not going to let any sort of high ankle sprain derail him. And if there is any sort of legend to Patrick Mahomes, did it not grow this weekend when he goes out there on 1 ankle, when he's shucking off that jacket and he's telling Andy Reid, no, let me deal with this at halftime? I mean, the grit, the determination, all of that. It's just, this is the fun time of year. These are the fun stories. Everybody left has a great story in some way.
Yeah, 100% agree. Definitely love the NFL playoffs for sure. Every year, just something new. And I'd actually picked the Bengals to beat the Bills. I was not surprised to see them win, but the way they won by 17, that was really surprising for me. And you had a great point about that offensive line. That was really the concern, and they only gave up 1 sack. And I think the Bengals team as a whole, they just step up as a whole. I mean, offensively and
yeah, the defense for sure. And we can't, it's funny. You could go and Google this. I had a really funny exchange with Tyler Boyd last year before the AFC title game. I was interviewing him as he came off the bus in Kansas City. And he's talking about how he thinks that the Bengals offense is just too much for the Chiefs. And I said, yeah, but what about your defense? And he was like, yeah, well, okay, whatever. But the offense, and I said to him, I think your defense is going to win this game. And then, of course, as you know, it was the defense that completely bowed up in the second half, kept the Chiefs to just that one late field goal. It was the defense that came up with that huge play in overtime to win the game. And I found Tyler Boyd on the field afterwards, and I was like, who told you? Who told you? And you can find it. There is Tyler Boyd telling me, you were right. You were right. So, of course, that defense, of course, what Lou Anarumo does with this group, the way that they are so smart. They can adapt. They are flexible. We know that Peyton Manning doesn't believe in adjustments, but sometimes you do need to kind of tweak a little bit of what you're doing. The Bengals are very, very, very good at that. They're very smart on the back end. I do think, though, that when you talk about, I had another point that I was going to make and now I lost it. See, you didn't even ask the tough question and I lost it. We're talking about the Bengals. We're talking about the offense. We're talking about their seasoning and where they are. And I just lost my point. So, well, okay. Can we edit that, or are we just going to say I lost my point?
No, I can edit that. I'll take that.
You don't need to edit it. Don't worry. That's what reality is, right? Isn't that what happens?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely agree. And just so impressed with the defense. They only led Stephon Diggs to 35 yards. That was it for him. And yeah.
I remembered my point. Sorry. Okay. So I was actually on the sideline for Westwood One, the Dolphins-Bills game. And you said you expected the Bengals to win. And it's sort of famously known that my little 7-year-old son has been a diehard member of Bills Mafia for 5 years. So I was afraid to publicly say this. But after that Dolphins-Bills game, I did tell quite a few friends I didn't think the Bills would win the following week. And we could talk about the matchups. We could talk about what the Bengals bring, the Bengals defense, and whether the Bills had more offensive weaponry beyond Diggs, as you just mentioned. But I think that there was just an emotional exhaustion on the Bills sideline. And when you walk the field during a game, when you're on the bench and you see what sort of mindset a team has, that whole first round game, that wild card game, the Dolphins were essentially playing with house money. They had nothing to lose. They could be aggressive. They could have fun. They were never tight. The Bills just felt a little tight. And you look at the arc of their season, everything that they've been through. And I think that that's a real thing. It's where a team emotionally, mentally is a very, very real thing. And it's a piece of coaching that sometimes goes unnoticed. And to go back to your team, the Texans, I don't even know if they're your team. They're your hometown team, but are they your team?
Yeah, they're my team for sure.
Well, I mean, I think credit to Lovie Smith that this was a team that did, by all accounts, was a very anemic roster, did not really have a full complement of 53 players that you could feel tremendous about, had a lot of young guys that didn't have a lot of experience, but that was a team that pretty much fought all the way up until week 18.
Yeah, I'd say so. They definitely made a lot of close games, and there are a lot of winnable games where they were, fighting, and that's ultimately what you want to see. But, it's going to be a long road for the Texans up ahead, and I'm glad that you mentioned them because I want to hear your thoughts on just that whole coaching search that's going on. I mean, they fired Lovie Smith after 1 year. This will be their 5th head coach in 4 years. You had Bill O'Brien, and then interim Romeo Crennel in 2020, and then David Culley in 21, Lovie Smith in 22, and it's going to be a new hire this year. And I think they've done a good job in terms of interviewing good candidates. D'Amico Ryans, Jonathan Gannon, Shane Steichen, Sean Payton. They had Mike Kafka on, the Broncos defensive coordinator as well. So, I mean, just what are your thoughts on this current situation with the Texans, and how do you think they can get the team right, really?
I think it's really important to get the right guy and not worry about winning the press conference. A lot of times in the NFL, we see owners really sort of be snookered in by who seems to be the guy that's charismatic and charming, and on press conference day will generate excitement for your fan base. And I think that what Nick Caserio and the Texans are doing right now is being very thorough. And it's important to doctor. I mean, it's a huge decision. You don't want to once again be a one and done. What did Sean Payton say just a few weeks ago on the air when he was asked about coming back to coaching? He said that the front office and ownership matters way more than the roster, because we all know the roster can turn over in just 1 year. You want to feel that there's a sense of stability. You want to feel that you're being set up to succeed. You want to feel like you have the ability to choose your assistant coaches and pick your staff to build as you see fit and be philosophically aligned. All of those things matter. And so I think that the Texans are methodically going through that process right now. And hopefully there are things that they've learned from the last 2 years, but they definitely don't want to be in a position of one and done yet again, because even though these are hard jobs to come by, the candidates that have the most confidence in themselves are not going to just jump at an opportunity. They'll feel like they need to wait for the right opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really important decision for Nick Caserio because, I think if he doesn't get this right, he's going to be the one that gets fired next offseason. So this is really important for the Texans as a whole. They have the number 2 pick. They need to get hopefully a quarterback. That's what Houston wants. So we'll see if they can get that right as well. But, with these AFC and NFC Championship games coming up, I really want to hear your thoughts on these 2 games. But I think the Chiefs versus Bengals game is obviously really enticing. You talked about Patrick Mahomes at that high ankle sprain. Even with one ankle, he was still finding a way to get things done through that touchdown pass in the fourth quarter. And he still had 73% completion percentage. And do you really think that the Chiefs can beat the Bengals with Mahomes and his injury? Because, the Bengals have honestly had their number 3 straight versus Kansas City. Do you have a prediction for the game at all?
Well, the Chiefs haven't been able to close it out, right? The Chiefs did have a lead twice, did play well through first halves in both games last year, and then the Bengals had an answer. So it's more about, can the Chiefs close? To me, I could see it going either way. I don't have as strong of a feeling. Let's say that. I don't have as strong of a certainty as I did going into the Bengals-Bills game. I think that there are still some things we need to monitor as the week goes on. How does that ankle really indeed respond? I think that what Chad Henne did was pretty incredible. I'd much rather have Patrick Mahomes if I'm Andy Reid all game than Chad Henne. But how about the last time we saw Chad Henne, he was doing good things in a divisional game against the Browns, right? And then he leads the longest ever touchdown drive in Chiefs history this past weekend. I think that it'll be a really good one. I think that that's why that's the primetime one. But I'm also very, very excited for the earlier game too, for the NFC matchup. And in a lot of ways, as tremendous as Jalen Hurts has been this year. And I think there's a really good story there, because if you remember, a year ago, people were ready to write Jalen Hurts off and they were ready to call him a bust. And so this is what patience and consistency in coaching can do for you. We had the Eagles. I was on the Eagles sideline earlier this season, and I was asking Jalen Hurts about Shane Steichen, his offensive coordinator. And the story there, of course, is that when Nick Sirianni was hired, he initially was calling the plays. And then he realized last year, you know what, I need to coach this entire club. I need to be available to everybody equally. And he gave up the play calling duties to Shane Steichen, which is not always the easiest thing for an ego to do. But Nick Sirianni said this would be what is best for the entire club. So Shane Steichen takes over. He's the OC last year. He's the OC again this year. And Jalen Hurts had 4 different offensive coordinators in college. So I asked, and they're accomplished offensive coordinators. So I asked Jalen, I said, what is it about Shane that stands out? What about him is maybe different? And he said, frankly, just that he's the same. And Jalen said this is the first time that he's had the same play caller in consecutive seasons since he was in high school, and his dad was his coach.
So you made some really great points about Jalen Hurts having that consistency with Shane Steichen as offensive coordinator. Hurts in the 38-7 win over the Giants had 3 touchdowns. The Eagles ran for almost 260 yards, but they're facing the number 1 defense in the 49ers now. Brock Purdy, 4 touchdowns. He was the last pick in the draft, but he hasn't looked like that at all. Both teams have a great chance to win, but who do you think would have a slight edge in the game?
You know what? That one is really hard for me too, because I really think it's about the defenses and what they can do. And you think about San Francisco's front, their defensive front, and how fast they are and aggressive. And yet I really love the Eagles offensive line too. So I think that that's a tremendous matchup, and it's not just okay, it's going to go one way. And then when you talk about Brock Purdy in a vacuum, obviously you take Jalen Hurts and that offense with two arguably number one receivers over a rookie, Brock Purdy. But this is the magic of Kyle Shanahan, right? And it takes me back to, we had a game with Mike McDaniel. I was, on the sideline for a CBS game with Mike McDaniel, and I can't remember which, we had them a couple times this year. I can't remember which game it was, but we were kind of talking about Mike McDaniel's process when he took over in Miami. And he said he actually focused more on the defense initially in terms of studying tape and trying to figure out what he had, because, and he said it sort of very offhandedly, we've kind of always had success with quarterbacks, or we've kind of always been able to make something out of quarterbacks. And when he says we, he of course means Kyle Shanahan, because he's been with Kyle Shanahan forever. And he said it in a throwaway line. He didn't say it with any arrogance. It was just sort of like, we've always felt like we could have success with them. You look at Kyle Shanahan, and that's exactly what the story is here, right? That he's won 10 straight games behind QB2, who was totally disrespected and basically subbed out for a rookie who hadn't done anything, and seemingly on his way out the door. I mean, he was almost traded to Washington before that fell apart. And then with QB3, who's Mr. Irrelevant. So I think that Kyle Shanahan is really, really good at getting the most out of his quarterbacks, at playing to his quarterback strengths. Brock Purdy, to me, is not the average rookie quarterback. And of course, confidence begets confidence. You go out there, you win as many games as he has. I think that he's feeling good about himself. I don't know. I in theory, I love the way both of these teams, I love how they do it. I love that they play great defense. I love that they know how to run the ball. I love their business model, quite frankly. I don't know. Do you have a favorite? Who's your favorite in that one?
I'm still going with the 49ers. They've done it before. I just like that defense, the way they've been playing. They just find ways to win, and I just have confidence in that defense for some reason. It's just a gut feeling of mine. And, two questions for you before you go. I would just love to hear about your journey in terms of how you got into sports, and if you always wanted to be a sports reporter, but also how would you, I guess, describe the steps you took to be in the position to where you are now? I mean, you've had an incredible journey with NFL Network, now at CBS Sports. So, it's really inspiring for me to see.
Well, I started as a newspaper writer, and I always tell everybody that that is truly the best training, because that's where you really are forced to tell full stories and not just give 30-second sound bites. I grew up a tomboy. My parents loved sports. My mom was an enormous Knicks fan. I grew up on baseball. I went to Yankee Stadium before I was 2 years old, but of course it wasn't supposed to be a career. I always had jobs and internships in sports writing or in something related to that. And part of that was because I wanted to be a lawyer, and to be a lawyer, you have to know how to write. And my father, who is a brilliant engineer, an IIT Bombay educated engineer, used to always say that writing is the most important skill that you can have. And the reason he would say that is because he worked with all these brilliant people whose ideas, as he put it, were worthless because they couldn't write down or explain their ideas fully. So my parents put up with, the internship at Sports Illustrated and the internship at ESPN Sports Ticker and writing for the local papers, because it was meant to be sort of training ground for the legal briefs I would write one day. Only when I graduated from Cornell, I decided to go take a job for what was supposed to be a year as a sports writer at the San Antonio Express-News, kind of sort of your neck of the woods, covering high school football. And I still remember, Manav, the very first game I went to. It was a Thursday night. It was in August. It wasn't even I don't even remember what they're called, like district. It wasn't a district game. It was like an out of district game. It was at the old, I think it's called the Alamo Bowl, the Alamo Stadium in Alamo Heights. And there were 10,000 people there. And I called my mom and I said, these people are nuts. Like, it was a high school game and there were 10,000 people there. And then by the end of the season, I'm at, the district championship or whatever it is at the Alamo Dome. And there's 50,000 people there. And it's just this huge thing. And there was nobody that was more into the moment than I was. So Texas high school football definitely taught me a lot of things. I went from there to the Bergen Record in New Jersey. I was covering college football and college basketball. And my dad was very regularly asking me, so when are you going to law school? So when are you going to law school? And those questions didn't stop until I got the job at the Wall Street Journal. And here's another funny story. So when I was at the Wall Street Journal for a few years, which was sort of finally, my mom was like, okay, and I remember having this conversation with my mom where all of her friends had children who were doctors or engineers or hedge fund people. And my poor mother had this Ivy League educated daughter who was making no money as a newspaper writer. And I said, yeah, but Mom, you should feel so special. You're the only one whose kid went in a totally different direction. Everybody else did what the classic Indian kids are supposed to do. So anyway, I'm at the Wall Street Journal. My mom loved it. The NFL Network calls, and I decided to leave the Wall Street Journal for the NFL Network and the opportunity to be on national television. And I don't think my mom was very happy. She said, it's not like it's NBC. Who even gets the NFL Network? So, because the Wall Street Journal, of course, had all this prestige to it.
Yeah.
But it was a great, it was a wonderful 10 years. I learned television. I was awful when I started, got way better. The storytelling is in many ways the same and different. You ultimately still want to take your viewer, your listener, someplace that no one else is taking them. You want to offer some depth, some context, but now you have to do it as opposed to in 1,500 words, in 30 seconds, you have to give them some nugget that they're not getting anywhere else. And you have to be able to speak to a really, really smart football person, to a coach, and you also need to be able to speak to a 60-year-old Indian mother who maybe didn't grow up on football, but now faithfully watches her daughter. So it was a wonderful experience. I really covered so much of the league. I mean, my job was to cover the whole league, but in the last 5 years, I very much honed in on the AFC North, which was never short of storylines. And then it was time to try something different, which is getting to be a part of actual game broadcasts. And I just love it. I mean, I love sitting in production meetings. I love having these very honest conversations about what's actually happening as opposed to kind of all the noise that's out there. I love being on the sideline during a game and standing behind a bench and hearing what's really happening. You can't always share that. A lot more than ever gets out there publicly. But for me, it's always, I just kind of like knowing it. Like, I don't need to feel good about sharing it. I just am someone who's always got this insane thirst for information and always wants to feel like I'm learning. And so I may know a lot of things that are not out there. I mean, I'll give you an example. I probably should. This is going to sound really obnoxious. I don't even know if I should give you this example, but there was a coaching hire announced today. And I knew that that was going to be the coaching hire before it was actually announced. And I messaged about it with multiple people, but it didn't matter to me that I'm breaking that story. I just like knowing it. Of course, then my husband will say to me, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, well, I just forgot. Sorry. So it's fun. It's fun. It's fun to get to bring another layer to a game that so many people love so much. And if you have the opportunity to share something even more, I mean, what a cool privilege, right?
Yeah.
And what a neat thing to get to share who the people are underneath the face mask and behind the jersey. And that's always been the piece of the game that's the most interesting to me.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely agree. I'm with my college newspaper right now, so just trying to, get as much experience as possible. And I 100% agree. Love knowing the information about these players. I've had a chance to, luckily interview a few of them and share their stories. So it's really impressive, and really, really enjoyed talking to you. The stories that you shared were really, really fun. And it's really inspiring for me to see that, you know, you're on TV, you're talking about the NFL on CBS, and you're with NFL Network. So it's really cool because you're there. So that means, you know, there's a pathway for people that come from the same background as you. So I really appreciate the time and the stories, and just thank you so much.
That's so sweet of you to say that. But remember, there will always be a space for people who work hard and who are smart. So you're already there. You are way ahead of where I was at 19, 18, 19. How old are you?
I'm 19.
19. Yeah. I don't even want to think about what I was doing at 19. Thank goodness it was in like the pre-TikTok era. That's all I have to say. Thank you for having me. And I can't wait to see you on a football field or in a press box somewhere soon.
Absolutely. Can't wait to. Thank you so much.
All right. Take
All right.
care.
Bye-bye.